It was supposed to be a perfect morning. A thin veil of fog hung over the Pacific. The waves rolled in quietly, almost politely, as if not wanting to disturb the holiday calm. Somewhere beyond the shoreline, a man paddled into the gray horizon, seeking nothing more than a moment of peace. And then, it happened. No shouts, no frantic splashes, no warning at all. Just silence. The kind of silence that makes your heart freeze before your mind even understands why. Minutes later, a fellow surfer would spot something drifting. At first glance, maybe driftwood, maybe a forgotten wetsuit. But as he drew closer, the truth surfaced. And it was worse than anyone could imagine. A lifeless body, face down in the surf. A body that had been struck with such force, such precision, that there could only be one suspect. The great white shark. And yet, this wasn't a feeding frenzy. This wasn't the chaotic, thrashing spectacle Hollywood has burned into our minds. This was something different, something colder. On Christmas Eve, 2021, in the quiet town of Morro Bay, California, one man's lifelong love for the ocean would intersect with the instincts of its most powerful predator. The result was one of the rarest and most haunting wildlife encounters in California's history. Over the next hour, we will retrace the final moments of Thomas Butterfield's life. We will dive into the behavior of the great white shark, the ocean's apex predator. We'll explore the mystery of why this attack happened here, why it happened so fast, and why it almost certainly wasn't meant for him. And along the way, we'll answer a question that haunts every ocean lover. If it could happen to him, could it happen to me? Welcome to our channel where we reveal hidden truths. Before moving further, go ahead and press red subscribe button and turn on notifications for more updates. Before we talk about sharks, we need to talk about Thomas Butterfield. Because this is not just a story about a predator. It's about a man. A man who loved the very ocean that would one day take his life. Thomas wasn't a thrill seeker. He wasn't the type to hunt monster waves or chase viral stunts for social media. At 42 years old, he had carved out a life of quiet balance. Born and raised in Sacramento, California, Thomas worked hard, lived simply, and kept his circle close. Friends described him as steady, grounded, the kind of person who didn't say much, but when he did, it mattered. For Thomas, the ocean wasn't a proving ground. It was a sanctuary. Every year, without fail, he made the trip to Morro Bay, a small, fog-draped town along California's central coast, where the waves crash against volcanic rock and the mornings smell faintly of salt and eucalyptus. To most people, it's just another coastal stop on Highway 1. But to Thomas, it was a place apart from the noise of the world. Locals remember him as respectful in the water. He didn't snake waves, didn't cut off other surfers, didn't make a scene. If you saw him out there, it was usually alone. Not chasing the biggest swell, but drifting just beyond the break, letting the rhythm of the sea clear his mind. And so, on the morning of December 24th, 2021, Thomas did what he'd done so many times before. He parked near Morro Strand State Beach, slipped into his wetsuit, strapped on his fins, and walked toward the surf with his bodyboard under one arm. The weather that morning was typical for Morro Bay in winter. Overcast skies, a chill in the air, low tide pulling the shoreline wide. Waves were modest, no more than shoulder height. To anyone watching, it looked like the safest kind of day to be in the water. There were no warnings posted, no closures, no sign, above the surface at least, that danger was near. Thomas waded in, water rising around his knees, his waist, then his chest. He kicked off into deeper water, board leash secured, settling into a slow, deliberate paddle. From shore, he would have been just another dark silhouette bobbing against the gray Pacific. He was alone, and this, more than anything else, would later haunt investigators. Because Thomas wasn't reckless. He wasn't inexperienced. But he was isolated. And somewhere below him, moving silently through the water, something was already on its way. The ocean that had always welcomed him was about to change. In a matter of minutes, this quiet morning would become one of the most chilling chapters in Morro Bay's history. It was 10:40 a.m. in Morro Bay. The fog clung stubbornly to the water's surface, muting the winter light. Offshore, The low rumble of waves rose and fell like the breath of something enormous and unseen. A handful of surfers dotted the lineup, their boards bobbing like patient birds waiting for the next swell. Somewhere among them, Thomas Butterfield paddled slowly on his bodyboard. Alone, focused, peace. And then, it happened. No warning. No shadow slicing through the surface. Not even the faint ripple of an approaching fin. In one moment, Thomas was paddling. In the next, he was gone. No one saw the strike itself. No thrashing water. No cry for help. Just silence. The kind of silence that feels wrong in your bones before your mind even registers why. Minutes later, a surfer riding near the outer break noticed something unusual drifting in the swell. At first, it looked like a piece of kelp, maybe an abandoned wetsuit sleeve. But as he drew closer, the outline sharpened. It was a body, face down, motionless, and tethered to that body by a thin cord. A bodyboard, still floating gently in the water. The surfer's stomach dropped. He shouted toward the others, waving frantically, before pulling alongside the lifeless figure. He rolled the man gently over, and that's when he saw it. The wetsuit shredded, torn from shoulder to lower back. A single catastrophic wound curved across the torso in a wide arc, deep enough to expose bone. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a boat strike or a collision with rocks. This was something else. Something alive. Something big. He hauled the body toward shore, his own breath shallow, every muscle screaming to move faster. Other surfers abandoned their boards to help, kicking through the cold water with the urgency of people who know seconds matter. By the time they reached the sand, lifeguards were already sprinting down from the access point at Atascadero Road. Radios crackled. Emergency crews converged on the scene. Yellow caution tape began to unfurl across the beach. But it was too late. Paramedics checked for a pulse, for any sign of life. Nothing. The coroner's van arrived before noon. Thomas Butterfield had been dead before anyone saw him floating in the surf. The wound told the story that no one had witnessed. A massive bite radius. A single, powerful strike from below. Not a second bite. Not an attempt to feed. Just one devastating impact and then release. The predator responsible didn't linger. It didn't circle back. It was already gone, vanishing into the gray Pacific as silently as it had appeared. But it had left behind a signature. And for investigators, that signature was unmistakable. A great white shark. Later analysis by California Fish and Wildlife and marine biologists would estimate the shark's length at well over 12 feet. Possibly closer to 15. This wasn't a juvenile. This was a fully grown apex predator. And yet, something about the attack puzzled the experts. Thomas's wound was catastrophic, enough to end his life within seconds. But no tissue had been removed, no flesh consumed. In shark behavior, this often points to what biologists call an exploratory bite. A test. To a great white shark hunting from the depths, Thomas's silhouette, lying low on his board, clad in a dark wetsuit with black fins trailing behind, may have resembled a seal. A perfect target. In those final seconds, the shark would have launched from the deep with terrifying speed, up to 25 miles per hour. Jaws open wide, eyes rolled back for protection. The bite itself would have lasted less than a second. And for Thomas, there was likely no time to react. No time to even know it was coming. The strike delivered enough blunt force to rupture vital organs instantly. Most likely, Thomas lost consciousness before his body even surfaced again. It was over before it began. But while the predator's involvement was clear, the bigger questions were only beginning to form. Why here? Why this man? Why now? Just hours before Christmas. And perhaps most haunting of all, could it happen again? To understand why Thomas Butterfield died that morning, you have to understand the hunter that killed him. The great white shark. For millions of years, it has ruled the oceans as one of nature's most efficient predators. Its design is ancient, perfected by evolution. A blend of speed, stealth, and power that has remained largely unchanged since before the dinosaurs went extinct. Great whites aren't mindless killers. They are precision hunters, ambush predators. They prefer to strike from below, where the surface light blinds their prey and their massive bodies remain hidden in the gloom. They rely on more than eyesight. Much more. Under the skin of their snouts lie thousands of tiny electroreceptors called ampullae of Lorenzini. These allow great whites to detect the faintest electrical fields generated by living creatures, the slow thump of a heart, the twitch of a muscle, even in total darkness. In hunting mode, they move silently, conserving energy until the exact moment they choose to strike. And when they strike, they do so with terrifying speed, propelling themselves upward at nearly 25 miles per hour, jaws yawning wide to deliver a bite with a force of nearly 4,000 pounds per square inch. The teeth themselves are like rows of serrated knives, designed not just to pierce, but to saw. And unlike humans, sharks never stop replacing them. A great white may lose thousands of teeth over a lifetime, each one replaced in perfect working order. But here's the part that still confounds many people. Great whites rarely eat humans. In fact, most fatal encounters, like the one that killed Thomas, appear to be cases of mistaken identity. Imagine, for a moment, that you are a shark 20 feet below the surface. Above you, a shadow glides across the water. It's dark, elongated, moving with a slow, paddling rhythm. Behind it, two dark shapes trail like flippers. To you, this isn't a person. It's a seal. And in your world, a seal means food. So you rise. Slowly at first, then faster. Faster still. The pressure in your muscles builds like a coiled spring. And then, you launch. This is what biologists call a breach attack. It's sudden, explosive, violent. Your jaws find the target in less than a second. But then, something's wrong. This isn't blubber. It's not meat. The taste, the texture, the density, none of it matches the seal your instincts told you was there. You let go. And vanish. This is why so many great white attacks involve just a single bite. The shark wasn't feeding. It was testing. Unfortunately, for a human being, that single test is often fatal. The pattern fit perfectly in Thomas's case. No tissue was removed. The wound was a single arc, and the shark never returned. According to marine biologists at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Shark Lab at California State University, Long Beach, the size of Thomas's wound indicated a shark measuring between 12 and 15 feet. A mature adult, possibly a female, which are generally larger than males. And the timing of the attack was no coincidence. Every winter, great whites migrate along California's coastline, moving south toward warmer waters. December is peak season for large adults passing through the central coast, including Morro Bay. This migration brings them closer to shore than usual, as they follow prey like elephant seals and sea lions. Morro Bay is surrounded by these prey-rich waters. Less than 20 miles north lies Piedras Blancas, one of the largest elephant seal rookeries in California. To a shark, this is a seasonal buffet. And when the seals are near shore, the sharks are too. But still, attacks on humans are extraordinarily rare. In California, between 1950 and 2021, there were fewer than 20 fatal shark attacks recorded. That's over a span of 70 years. Statistically, your odds of dying from a shark encounter in U.S. waters are less than 1 in 3.7 million. Yet, for Thomas Butterfield, those odds collapse to zero on a gray December morning. Experts emphasize that great whites do not hunt humans. There is no evidence of targeted aggression toward people. But the truth is colder. We sometimes fall into the overlap of their hunting patterns. We are not on their menu, but in the wrong place, at the wrong time, we can become collateral damage in their ancient game of survival. And that reality raises a question that haunts every ocean lover who hears Thomas's story. If the odds are so small, how did it happen here? And why him? By noon on December 24, 2021, Morro Bay was no longer just a quiet coastal town preparing for the holidays. It had become a scene of grief and disbelief. The beach was sealed off by yellow caution tape. Lifeguard trucks idled near the shoreline. Emergency crews clustered in tight circles, speaking in low, urgent tones. The rhythmic sound of the waves seemed cruelly indifferent to what had just happened. Word traveled fast, first through text messages, then local news alerts, then whispers in coffee shops and along the harbor. By mid-afternoon, Nearly everyone in town had heard the words they never expected. Fatal shark attack. For longtime residents, it was unthinkable. Morro Bay was known for fog and fishing, for families and retirees, not for death in the surf. This was the kind of headline that belonged to Australia's wild coasts or South Africa's seal-rich shores. Not here. And yet, it had happened. For Thomas's family, Christmas Eve shattered in an instant. Somewhere in Sacramento, a phone rang. The voice on the other end carried the kind of news no one is prepared to hear. Thomas hadn't drowned. He hadn't been in a boating accident. He had been attacked by a shark. In that moment, time itself seemed to break. The coroner's office confirmed his identity from the items found in his car. A wallet, a set of keys, a driver's license. The official cause of death would be determined in the following days, but to his loved ones, the details hardly mattered. The reality was already unbearable. In Morro Bay, strangers began leaving flowers along the sand dunes near the access point where Thomas entered the water. Someone placed a candle inside a glass jar, its small flame flickering against the damp December air. Notes appeared, some handwritten, some printed, with messages like "You were one of us and you are remembered." People who had never met Thomas felt compelled to mark his passing. Surfers spoke quietly among themselves about the conditions that morning, retracing his final paddle in their minds. Parents clutched their children a little tighter as they walked the shoreline. Even the harbor seals that lounged on the docks seemed to draw more stares than usual, as if they were silent witnesses to something the rest of us couldn't see. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife issued a statement later that afternoon confirming what locals already feared. The attacker was almost certainly a great white shark. The beach would be closed for 24 hours as a precaution. Lifeguards and rangers would patrol the waters. But by Christmas morning, the ocean would reopen. The sea does not pause for grief. In the days that followed, Thomas's family avoided the cameras. They asked for privacy. Friends described him in quiet interviews. A soft-spoken man, deeply introspective, who found his peace in nature. He wasn't chasing adrenaline. He wasn't showing off. He was simply doing what he loved, in a place he trusted. A small GoFundMe appeared online to help with memorial expenses. It didn't carry the urgency of a viral fundraiser. It wasn't meant to. It was a quiet gesture, a way for people to express their sympathy in a tangible form. On the water, things changed subtly. Surfers began glancing over their shoulders more often. Paddles to the lineup took a little longer, as if hesitation had crept in where confidence used to be. Conversations about shark sightings, usually told as thrilling anecdotes, now carried a different weight. For many in Morro Bay, the ocean's wild beauty had always come with a hint of risk. But now that risk had a face, a name, and a date stamped forever in memory. December 24th was no longer just Christmas Eve. It was the day Thomas Butterfield died in the surf. And as much as the community wanted to move forward, a question still hung in the air like salt spray over the waves. Could it happen again? Statistically, the answer was almost certainly no. But statistics don't erase memories. They don't erase the image of a bodyboard washing ashore without its rider, or the sound of a helicopter circling low over the bay in search of something that was already gone. For the people of Morro Bay, the shark attack wasn't just a freak tragedy. It was a reminder, a sharp, unignorable reminder, that the ocean is still wild, that even here, where the waves seem familiar and the beaches feel safe, nature operates on rules older and harsher than our own. And in that truth lies both the terror and the beauty of the sea. Long before wetsuits, before surfboards, before humans ever dared to ride the ocean's swells, sharks were here. They ruled these waters for over 400 million years, twice as long as dinosaurs. They have survived multiple mass extinctions, ice ages, and the rise and fall of entire continents. And through it all, their design has barely changed, because it didn't need to. In every ocean culture, sharks occupy a place of awe and fear. In Polynesian legend, they are Aumakua, ancestral guardian spirits who guide and protect. In Hawaiian myth, the shark god Kamaholii could shift between human and shark form, ferrying lost voyagers safely to shore. But in Western culture, our stories took a darker turn. For centuries, sharks were seen not as protectors but as monsters, bloodthirsty, unpredictable, and relentless. By the time the 20th century arrived, this image was cemented by sensationalist news headlines and later by Hollywood itself. And then came Jaws in 1975. The movie redefined sharks in the public imagination, not as a wild animal following instinct, but as a calculating villain that could stalk and terrorize an entire community. In reality, of course, sharks are neither villains nor heroes. They are simply predators doing what predators do. But the cultural damage was done. Fear turned to persecution. In the decades following Jaws, shark populations around the world plummeted. Targeted hunts and shark culls were launched in multiple countries. In some places, bounty programs paid fishermen for every shark they killed. Globally, tens of millions of sharks were slaughtered each year, many for their fins alone, to supply the booming shark fin soup market. And yet, despite our fear, sharks remain far more threatened by us than we are by them. For every human killed by a shark each year, millions of sharks are killed by humans. The imbalance is staggering. And this imbalance matters because sharks are not just another species. They are keystone predators. Remove them, and entire marine ecosystems begin to unravel. Without sharks to regulate prey populations, fish stocks can collapse, coral reefs can degrade, and ocean health as a whole can decline. This is the paradox of the human-shark relationship. We fear them, but we need them. And yet, the fear persists. Fear fueled by rare but shocking tragedies like the one in Morro Bay. When a fatal shark attack happens, it reignites every cultural myth we've ever told about them. It reminds us that for all our mastery over land, we are not the top predator at sea. In this way, Thomas Butterfield's death is part of a much longer story. It's a story about how humans navigate the thin, shifting line between respect and fear, between coexistence and conflict. It's a story about how one moment, one strike from a shark, can ripple far beyond the person it takes, shaping the way entire communities see the ocean for years to come. But there's another side to this history, a quieter side. Around the world, scientists, divers, and conservationists are working to change the narrative. They tag and track sharks to understand their migrations. They study attack patterns to prevent future tragedies. And they fight to protect shark populations from overfishing, knowing that a healthy ocean depends on healthy shark numbers. And sometimes these efforts bring humans and sharks into a new kind of relationship, not one of fear but of understanding. Divers who spend years around great whites often describe them not as mindless killers, but as curious, cautious animals that are more likely to avoid humans than attack them. This is the balance the ocean demands, to respect the predator without demonizing it. But respect comes with responsibility. We must remember that every time we step into the water, we enter their world. A world where their rules apply, not ours. A world where, as Thomas's story reminds us, even the smallest chance encounter can have irreversible consequences. And perhaps the lesson in all this is that we have never truly been separate from sharks at all. We've shared these waters for millennia. We share them still. And if we are to share them in the future, we must learn to live with the knowledge that beneath the waves, the ocean's oldest hunter still waits. The ocean has never belonged to us. And yet we have always been drawn to it, for food, for travel, for sport, for peace. For Thomas Butterfield, it was a sanctuary. But the same waters that gave him joy also held an ancient predator, one that answered to no human law. The truth is, moments like the one in Morro Bay will happen again. Not often, not predictably, but they will happen because when we step into the sea, we step into a world where we are not at the top of the food chain. So what does coexistence look like? Some communities have turned to technology. In parts of Australia and South Africa, smart drumlines detect tagged sharks and send alerts in real time. Aerial drones patrol beaches, scanning for the dark silhouettes that could spell danger. In California, shark spotting programs train lifeguards and surfers to identify telltale signs from shore. But no measure can remove risk entirely. Coexistence also demands awareness, not just of the risks, but of the role sharks play in the health of the seas. Education programs now teach children that sharks are not villains, but vital guardians of the marine food web. Conservation groups fight to protect shark populations from unsustainable fishing. Scientists work tirelessly to understand shark behavior so that we can avoid the rare moments when their instinct collides with our presence. For some, that understanding comes with a personal shift. Surfers who once feared the water after an encounter sometimes return, not with recklessness, but with a renewed respect. Divers describe the awe of seeing a great white in the wild, its size and power humbling even in stillness. They know that the animal before them is not a monster, but a survivor, a link in a chain that stretches back hundreds of millions of years. And then there are those who, like Thomas, will never come home from the ocean. For their families, the concept of coexistence is harder to embrace. Grief has a way of sharpening fear. It's one thing to speak about harmony between species. It's another to stand on a shore where someone you loved was taken. This is the tension that will always define our relationship with sharks. The desire to respect them, and the instinct to protect ourselves from them. But perhaps the real lesson isn't about choosing one over the other. Perhaps it's about accepting that the ocean is not ours to control, only ours to enter with humility. We cannot fence it off. We cannot make it safe in every moment. But we can learn, we can prepare, and we can honor those who remind us, even in tragedy, of the ocean's true nature. On the shores of Morro Bay, the flowers left for Thomas Butterfield have long since withered. The tide has carried away the footprints of those who came to mourn. The waves keep breaking against the sand. The fog still drifts in from the Pacific, and somewhere beyond the breakers, a great white shark glides silently through the deep. It is not thinking of us. It is simply being what it has always been. And maybe that's the point. Our challenge is not to tame the ocean's oldest predator, but to live with the knowledge that it is still out there, and always will be. Because the ocean is not just a place. It is a force. It is a history. It is a reminder that we are guests in a world that existed long before us, and will endure long after we are gone. Thomas Butterfield's story is a tragedy, but it is also a testament, a reminder that beauty and danger often live side by side, and that the line between them can be crossed in an instant. And so the next time you stand at the water's edge, remember, the ocean's peace is real, but so is its power. Step in with wonder, step in with respect, and never forget who truly rules beneath the waves. If the story moved you, share it. Because the more we understand sharks, the more we understand our place in the ocean, and the more we can protect both.